Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Subconscious Medicine. It's been a while, guys. It's been a long time. The last few episodes were pre-recorded way in advance, and then I took a full week or so off to catch you up a little bit on what's going on in my life. I had a surprise visitor the last few days of summer, which was so exciting. But that did mean it put a little wrench in my podcast planning, but all good, life happens. And then this week that I'm filming this is the first week of classes, which can be pretty hectic. It's kind of a blessing and a curse, I feel like, but I'm not working this week. I have an on-campus job, and they gave us the week off, which sounds like a great thing, and it is, and I'm grateful for a little bit of flexibility in my schedule this week. But I also am just really eager to get into a routine, and I feel like I can't fully do that when I'm not working my usual hours. So easing into the school year a bit, trying to be grateful for the little bit of spare time, and in that spare time, doing things like this. So the semester is quickly coming to a start, and to be quite frank, I have been experiencing a lot of anxiety about that, and I was hoping that this isn't what I had planned, but I was hoping that today's episode could just sort of be like my stream of consciousness right now and talking through those thoughts, because at least to me, when you're a young adult and you're experiencing these anxieties, it can feel extremely isolating and lonely up in that big head of yours. But I know I'm not alone. I know that a lot of these concerns or worries, or just uncertainties about the future, are not unique to me. And even though it can feel that way sometimes, I think it's really important to hear each other out. And yeah, just recognize that we're sort of all in the same boat. We don't have our life figured out, as perfect as it may seem. We're all just trying to get through it. And even those of us that do have a plan and do think that we know what we want to do with our lives, or we can sort of map out our 5-10 year plan, whatever, likelihood is that life is not going to make that plan feasible. And at some point in time, there's going to be a wrench thrown in that plan, and we have to, be gracious with one another, and maintain a little bit of flexibility and be able to sort of pivot to what life throws at us. So as I mentioned, I'm hoping that this episode honestly is more for me than it is for you, in sort of a selfish way, but I have been doing just that. I've been sort of isolating myself in these thoughts and worries, and trust me, these aren't new. I sort of feel like this time of year, every semester, I experience some version of these thoughts. I think it's just part of the new year, and part of what comes with it. But as I mentioned, I'm trying to accept those worries and actually act on them instead of allowing them to sort of be debilitating. So, for those of you that don't know, I am a psychology major. I am a senior at the University of Tampa. Um, I'm only in my third year of college, so I am graduating early. And I mention that because that was very much not my choice. Actually, no, let's reframe that. It was a choice that I did make, but it wasn't intentional. I'll say that. I transferred schools, and if you've been in the transfer process, or you know anything about it, credit transfers and all that type of stuff are really complex, and sometimes it works in your favor and sometimes it works really against people's favor. In my case, it sort of worked in my favor, and differences in curriculum at these schools and etc., and differences in AP score acceptances and things of that sort have resulted in an opportunity for me to graduate early. And that didn't come without a few sacrifices. I definitely have taken more than the standard credit hour, like minimum per semester. And I also did take 2 classes this past summer. So, it did take a little bit of extra work, but in the grand scheme of things, not much. And, those small little changes to my schedule mean that I do have the opportunity to graduate a full year early, which is not an opportunity that many people have. And to be honest, when I first was presented with that opportunity, I was very hesitant because I had already lost my first year of university at UT. I had a freshman year, but in large part last year felt like sort of another freshman year because I was starting from scratch at a new university. And so I felt like I was sort of getting the short end of the stick on both ends. I lost my freshman year experience at, my current university, and now I'm losing another year off the back end. So it felt rushed, and so I was very hesitant, and I put a lot of thought into it. I very much weighed the pros and cons, and I told myself, I said, I'm not going to make a definitive decision. I'm going to put myself in a place so that both options are feasible. And sort of as last year went on, I continued to make choices that would make this possible. And at this point in time, it's starting to feel like the right choice. To take an extra year and sort of drag out my classes doesn't seem enticing anymore. And I am losing a year, but I also am saving a ton of money by not by graduating in 3 years, and so it's starting to feel like the right choice. And as pessimistic as I was about that prior, I'm learning to accept it and just trying to appreciate my senior year. I know it's going to be a good one. I know it's going to come with tons of opportunities and new people and experiences, and I'm really grateful for that. Um, all this being said, I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety as of late. Um, and I know I'm not alone in this, as much as it may feel that way, but I'm experiencing a lot of anxiety related to like pre professional development and sort of, post grad plans and academic pursuits and long term career goals and things of that sort. In some ways, that's essentially what college is a period of time designated to exploring those things. And when it's cut a little bit short, sometimes it puts an extra burden or pressure on people to make decisions. And I'm an indecisive individual as it is, and so making decisions quickly is certainly not my strong suit. So yeah, I also too, I don't think that I really have, again, I'm hesitating to even say this, but I don't really think that I have a good person to talk to about this. And that's not to say I don't have people that support me. I definitely do. But there are times when you're going through something, and the most valuable perspective is of someone who has gone through something similar. And I don't know anyone who's gone through something similar. I don't know anyone who's had the types of experiences that I've had. I don't know many transfer students, and the ones that I do, they're not graduating early, or their transfer experience has been a bit different than mine, or they're certain on what they want to do, post grad, or at least they think they are. And so I think I sort of have a unique deck of cards in my hand. Um, I've explored a lot of different career options, and I do think that my situation is a bit unique in that most people I find fall at one extreme end of the spectrum. They sort of kind of have no idea what it is that they want to do, and they're going through undergrad exploring different options, and that's wonderful. And then there's the other end of the spectrum of people who are pretty like steadfast on what it is that they want to do. They pick a major that's quite direct in getting them there. I'm thinking of like nursing friends. When you're in a nursing collegiate program, it's pretty streamlined, and then you graduate. There's no graduate school really. And you sort of jump right into the hospital setting. You don't have to worry about getting a job. There will always, hospitals will always need nurses, and so in that way, it seems quite, not easy by any means, but direct, I guess, is the right word. And if you know anything about the psychology field, it's very much not like that. I don't know if I mentioned even that I'm a psychology major, but I am. And there was a lot of career opportunities in psychology, and for a long time that's precisely what enticed me about it, was the flexibility and the opportunities to work in so many different settings with so many different types of people. um, and, as I've progressed through my undergraduate education, I have grown a certain affinity for a grouping of people. And that grouping of people is, people, children, and families affected by foster care, and, the juvenile justice population, of which in both populations there's pretty strong overlap. Um, and I think that I've done a lot of reflecting as to why I feel such a strong pull to that population. I think in large part it has something to do with my sort of early childhood experiences. I had some contact with that population through some of my own family members, and I I feel like in part sort of experienced the corruption that exists within that system. If you don't know, our foster care system is it's quite a train wreck. And there's no easy fix. If it was, then I'm sure someone would have already um, taken care of that. But our juvenile justice system is sort of devised of our adult criminal system. Our that it's sort of modeled after criminal prisons, and um, you know we for a long time were driven by these punitive methods. So someone commits a crime and they go to jail and they're punished for that crime, and their crime is sort of evaluated on um, severity. And from that evaluation, the person is given like a time designation of how long they are to stay in that facility. Now, in recent years, there's been an urge to shift, specifically in juvenile facilities, although some adult prisons are also trying to make this shift. But mostly with kiddos, what we see is a shift towards what we call a rehabilitative approach, meaning, instead of exercising punitive um, decision making, we're sort of shifting to a rehabilitative approach that allows for learning and development and true behavior modification. And at surface level, wow, that sounds like an excellent shift. And if again that was an easy fix, then sure thing, that does sound like a great change. Except the question remains, well, how do we do that? We have so many kids in this situation, and in a lot of repeat offenders, I may add. And you know how do we make this type of programming accessible? How do we make that transition? How do we disseminate this across the country? How do we evaluate progress? How do we enact reform? Like all of these really, really big questions that involve a ton of people and a ton of policy reform, and there's no clear answer. Much like any systematic change, it requires a lot of moving pieces, and sometimes it's easier to stay stuck in your ways than it is to accept and enact change. And so that oftentimes results in very slow change. And don't get me wrong, this this type of corruption is 1000% not unique to this type of work, but I do think that this is a great example um, that sort of lays it out in a more digestible manners. You know, no one ever said that our prison system was effective, and I think it's blaringly obvious, especially due to like real world current events. Just how messed up our this the system in our country has become. Um, so, as I was mentioning, I sort of have been drawn to this population and this type of work for a few years now. And I, I talk to classmates who are interested in the psychology field as well. And as I mentioned, some, have really no idea what they want to do with this degree, while others feel like a strong pulling towards a specific career. But what I've found is that most people, and this could just be the pool of people that I'm talking to, but most people tend to know the end career goal, not necessarily the population. So, for example, I know a ton of people who see themselves becoming some type of therapist, counselor, mental health service provider. However, they haven't decided yet if they want to work with children or adults, or, you know, adults experiencing substance abuse, adults experiencing physical abuse or trauma or PTSD or whatever, So they have identified the career that they want to obtain, not necessarily the population that they want to have contact with. Which, totally fine. And I kind of almost, it seems like that might be the norm. I, for one, though, think I have the opposite um, sort of, sort of, I want to say issue hesitantly. It's not an issue, but I'm in the opposite position. I don't know really the specific career or title rather that I want to have. What I do know is the population that I want to work within. And the question that I'm trying to answer then is, I've identified this population, I've identified some of the changes that I wish to see or I wish to assist with. What career, what educational background will provide me the most resources to be able to do that? And that's where I'm stuck. If you are a psychology major, the sort of fad right now seems to be a clinical psychologist. Like, everyone wants to be a clinical psychologist, and that's wonderful. I don't know, though. I think about clinical psychologists and I think to myself, I'm not sure that that's the best way to come in contact with this population. Um, Also, if you're unfamiliar, most psychology majors in undergrad pursue a graduate education. You definitely don't need to, but pursuing a graduate education opens up a lot of doors. If you so amongst the graduate options, there are sort of two paths that people generally go down. Now, don't get me wrong, of course, there are other options, but the two most common are a sort of master's program. Those generally take about 2 to 3 years, and those are your therapists, your counselors, your clinicians. They are mental health providers. And so if you are looking to do traditional talk therapy, that's sort of the route that most of those people go. The other alternative is a PhD program. And PhD programs are about 5 to 7 years, so definitely a longer investment. But they offer all the same opportunities that a master's degree would have. But they do add a few things. The major one being sort of academia. So if you are someone who's interested in doing therapy, you're interested in that therapeutic setting, but you also want to have the opportunity to maybe be a college professor, then having that PhD can give you a bit of a leg up. And so people who see themselves, down the line becoming a professor or working in the therapeutic setting alongside teaching young students, those are generally the types of people that pursue a doctorate. Also, doctorates tend to have a stronger research emphasis. So if you're interested in doing research in the psychology field, then again, those people are likely to pursue a PhD than a master's. So now that we have that sort of laid out, I always saw myself pursuing a PhD because I had an interest in research. Um, I've sort of always known that I don't see myself in that traditional therapeutic setting. And that's precisely, what makes this conversation so unsettling for me, because that's what most psychology majors want, is they want to be a therapist or some type of mental health provider. Now, huge shout out to all of those people and credit to you, because that is amazing work and we need more of you. And, I'm here to support that in any way that I can. However, the reason I don't think that that type of work for me is because I have identified a community that, like I said, needs systematic change. And when a system is corrupt rather than, individual relationships being strained or something of that sort, when the entire system is corrupt, to try to address these issues on an individual basis is entirely impractical. And it perpetuates the cycle of the system failing more and more people. And so when I decided that the population that I want to work with is this, juvenile delinquent population, I decided, being in a traditional therapeutic one-on-one setting and engaging in traditional talk therapy and assessment, that's not going to allow me the resources or allocate me the resources I need to create systematic change within this corrupt system. And so, again, for a long time, I've decided that's not for me. So, that's a decision I've made. And I suppose, people always say knowing what you don't want to do is just as important as knowing what you do want to do. And so I'm grateful for that. But it also, like I said, makes me a bit uneasy because it seems that that's what my peers want to do. That's what they're drawn to. And I get it, that it's a flexible schedule. It allows for specialization. You can pinpoint a population you want to work with, so that's a great opportunity. Um, it's it's work that's needed. Maybe now more than ever too. So I understand the draw, I do, but I don't think it's for me, and I don't think it will allow me the resources I need to create the change that I want to see. So, moving on, I've decided that therapy is not really for me, which means that the master's level degree would also not be for me, because that's what that degree is designed to do, is to produce mental health professionals. And so that's why I was always drawn to the PhD. I was interested in the research aspect, not just therapy, not just assessment. And I also decided that I didn't want a traditional talk therapy setting. Now, that being said, I also don't have a draw to teach students. Now, if that opportunity arises at some point in my career, I don't see myself passing that up. But that is not my goal. I've identified changes that I want to see within a system, and I want to be a part of that change. And my hope is that if I can play a role in getting the ball rolling and find other people like me who have the, similar passions and aspirations, that we can sort of pave the way for future students. But I don't think that me having all these goals and passions and then going to teach other students so that they can do it, that seems like I'm sort of pushing my goals onto them, and I'd rather go after them myself. So, I don't really see myself in the therapeutic setting. I don't really see myself in the academia setting. Now, this is the space that I've been stuck in for a long time is okay. I don't see myself in these list of spaces, but I want contact with this group, but I have an affinity for psychology and learning about the brain and learning about psychological disorders and substance abuse and childhood development and all of these things. So, how do I get there? What title do I need to access that population and better serve their needs in the current system that we have in place? And this is where I'm stuck. This is where I contemplate new careers all the time, and I consider what it is that I need to do. And this also, introduces an interesting, like, internal battle that I'm having. I recently had a conversation about this with a professor, who I'm particularly close with, and this definitely speaks more to my own anxiety and lack of confidence than anything. But I do think it's a fascinating idea to sort of at least contemplate and entertain, and that is, um, you know, we all struggle at points in our lives. We all go through things. We all experience tough times, and not to diminish my own experiences in any way, um, but on the surface, I am a upper middle class white woman from Connecticut. I grew up in a home with both parents in the home. I grew up with opportunities to attend an incredible public school system, to participate in athletics or any other extracurriculars that I wanted to. I graduated high school with the opportunity to attend college. I went to college. I decided it wasn't for me, and I had supportive parents at home help me make the transition to a new university where they now get to watch me thrive, and they continue to support me from afar. I, live a luxurious lifestyle. All things considered, I'm in large part still financially dependent on my parents, and, on the, I don't worry about things any more than the normal college kid worries. I worry about school, I worry about my academics, but I don't have additional stressors beyond that. So all of that to say, these are my circumstances, and yet the population that I want to work with is basically the polar opposite. Typically not women or girls in juvenile detention. It's male dominated, um, minority dominated as well, not white. Um, Socioeconomically speaking, there's a large disparity. Um, and the list goes on and on. And so sort of the running thought in the back of my head is, who am I as this upper middle class white woman from Connecticut to say that this is the population I want to work with, to say that I'm even capable of working within this setting, or to say that they owe me respect, or they owe me their trust. They should impart their faith in me to enact change for them. Um, and there are times where I convince myself, I'm like, Ellie, you're so naive. You're so, to think that you are going to make a difference within a population so different from you is sort of just ignorant. And when I say this out loud, I hear myself sort of buffering at the inconsistencies in my own logic, but I'm having this conversation with this professor who knows me very well. She's heard me say things of this sort in the past, but she made a good point. And she used the analogy of a deck of cards, and she says, we're all handed our own deck, and we don't have control over that. What we do have control over, though, is how we choose to play the game, how we choose to play our cards. And it's seemingly fairly simple, but to me, that puts some things into perspective a bit. I said for so long I've beat myself up about the deck of cards that I've been handed, and I've, you know, sort of been concerned about not being relatable to like my clientele or to the people that I work with on a day-to-day basis, um, as if I have control over those things. And I don't. Um, However, it is certainly my responsibility to not only recognize the disparities, but also the circumstances that come with them, to educate myself on other people's alternate experiences and be sensitive to those, be informed, and perform my work accordingly. Um, so, a simple shift, maybe, but it was kind of eye-opening. And so this leads me to my sort of current state where I'm again continuing to think about career goals, and where I see myself. So I've pondered a lot of different options. The first is an MSW, Master's in Social Work. My sister did her undergrad in psychology, got her master's in social work. She works with a different population, um, specifically adults experiencing substance use. And props to her. um, I always say little kids, little problems, big people, big problems. And, kids are a handful. And I don't think it's easy work by any means. But I don't know how she does it. I don't think I'm the right person for that type of work. I think she does a great job. Not to say that it's not draining, or I'm sure it is, but that's work that needs to be done, and it requires the right type of person. I've sort of decided that this is a hard field, and anyone who enters it goes in knowing that. Um, but because the burnout is so intense, and because it's so easy to get caught up in it all, and the turnover rates are so high, I think we all need to not only be aware of our own strengths and weaknesses and set our own boundaries, but also be cognizant of the ways in which we can make our work more enjoyable for ourselves. And for me, I've decided that something about working with kids, working with youth who have a whole life ahead of them that they haven't even like begun to think about yet, let alone experience, that is motivating. So, yes, I've decided that working with youth is my way of continuing to feel inspired and motivated despite pursuing a tough professional career. So I felt confident in this decision, and um, I had an experience this summer that has tainted my perspective of it. I had the wonderful opportunity of working at a local nonprofit here in Tampa. It is a nonprofit dedicated to helping children and families affected by the foster care system, so it was right up my alley. And I will preface this by saying that I was an unpaid intern, and so, I went into it well aware of the circumstances and the typical treatment of unpaid interns, and I was ready for that, because I saw it as a valuable experience, and I wanted to have, a new form of contact with this population that I have identified I want to work with. Um, and I loved my work. I loved working with the youth that I got to work with. Um, they they make the experience incredibly enjoyable. They make you feel valued, and building relationships with them throughout the summer was, the highlight of this experience. But one thing about kids is they say what's on their mind. They don't really hesitate much. And what they're thinking is, it never stays up in their head. It usually comes out in some form. And I had a conversation with a handful of kids between the ages of maybe 7 and like 12, young kids, a conversation about dads. Um, if you don't know, I am extremely close with my father. I'm also close with my mother, but me and my dad have always sort of had a particularly strong bond, in large part probably through athletics. I grew up playing competitive softball. He grew up playing competitive baseball, and he was just always sort of my number one fan. I have his writing tattooed on my arm, and we were just always close. And we were engaging in an activity, and eventually, a conversation resulted from a question I had asked. And the conversation was revolving around role models, and many of the youth mentioned their mom or some female figure in their life. And finally we get to the end of the circle, and they all say, "Wait, what about you, Miss Ella? Who's your role model? Who do you look up to?" And without really much hesitation, I said, "Oh, my dad. I'm particularly close with him, and I look up to my dad in a lot of ways." And the kiddos laughed. Now, we the um at the place that I worked at, we preach trauma informed care, and part of being trauma informed is recognizing emotional dysregulation and offering the opportunity for even children to express their voices, communicate emotional reactions, and um, try to be emotionally validating to them. And so when a kid exhibits sort of an inappropriate emotional response to a comment, such as laughing at me saying who I look up to, it should prompt a discussion, and not a belittling one, but one that encourages some reflection and some thoughtful communication. And so I asked them to explain why they were laughing, and this was a long-winded, probably 30-minute conversation, but it resulted in the kid saying, "Dad's leave." And it may be a coincidence, likely not though. The four youth that were sitting at the table in front of me, all four of them didn't have a dad. Either they have never met their father, either their father was incarcerated, or their father had left at some point in their life and they didn't maintain any type of relationship. And I, as in my head, this middle class white woman, I'm thinking to myself, "Oh, should I not have said that? Should I have been more considerate of their circumstances?" I knew they didn't have a relationship or with their father or a father figure in their life. And I'm going back and forth debating whether or not this was inconsiderate of me to say. And I landed on no. I came to the conclusion that me lying to them, and not that saying my mother would have been a lie, but me not being honest with my initial answer to the question would have been a disservice, and me being honest allowed us to have a really, really, really informative conversation about role models and about family dynamics and um, you know commitments. And it proved to be really valuable, and I essentially just communicated to them, there's nothing about a father that makes him leave. People leave. There are mothers that leave as well. And it's nothing about being a male that perpetuates that cycle. And there are a lot of people who do have the privilege of having a father figure in their life. And, I explained to them, I said, I am not hurt by your reaction in any way. And I'm glad that this opened up a discussion. But I said, we need to value the people that we have in our lives, no matter who they are. Maybe it's not a parent at all. Maybe it's a grandparent or a friend or an adoptive parent or a different family member or a teacher or whomever it is, but we need to value those people regardless of, you know, who they are, what the expected role of that person is, and rather be gracious for the people that do stay. And so I said, I have a mom at home too. I'm privileged to have two parents, and I love them both. And in many ways, different ways, but in many ways, my mom is a role model for me as well. But, when you asked me that question, the first thought that came to mind was my father. And, I said, I sympathize with the fact that you don't have a fatherly figure in your life. And I wish you had that experience, I said. But I also encourage them to think about, you guys are little, but one day you might have a family of your own. And if you think that fathers leave and that's what all dads do, and you do that to your own kids, then we're perpetuating that cycle, right? And the way that we break this cycle is by encountering people who are in that position who do stay, by meeting dads who do play a vital role in um, upbringing and adolescence. And, I, of course, communicated this in a very different way because the kids were 7, 10, whatever. And I had to be careful with my wording for sure, but that conversation really struck me. And it just further solidified the idea in my head that, I need to be in a position that will provide me an immense amount of resources if I want to be a person to make a change. And granted, I don't think that I'm capable alone of the types of changes that this system needs. It's going to take a lot more than me. But if people like-minded to me can, if we can share our resources amongst one another, then I'm hopeful that we can create change for future generations. And so, that conversation was hard, but I think about it all the time. Whenever I think about my career, that comes to mind, and I don't really think it's something I'm ever going to forget. So this lands us where I am right now. As I mentioned, I have considered the social work route. Social workers typically aren't doing 1v1 therapeutic settings. They may do more group setting type of interventions, but they're not doing the one-on-one setting. So that's a check in my book because that's not really where I see myself. A lot of times they do have, federal government or federal funding, so a bit more resources. Certainly still underfunded. And they do work in sort of like community or nonprofit settings very often, and so that to me is enticing. But there are certainly cons to being a social worker. As I mentioned, they're undersupported in a lot of ways. They also don't make much money, which, I'm pursuing work that I'm passionate about. Money is not my driving force, but I also need to protect my own peace. And if I've sort of in my head have an idea of the type of lifestyle that I want to live long term, and I do think it's important that young people consider the pay that their future job will provide in order to decide if that's the right fit for them. And so it's definitely a factor. in our decisions. Like I said, I don't think it should be the primary decision um, driver, but I do think it's important to consider. And so social work is sort of up there. Now, I've also considered a more public health route, similarly, a fairly general degree. Um, but to be quite frank, I don't feel like I know enough about it to say that that's sort of what I want to do. So I am exploring that as we speak. Definitely not off the table, but I also don't think I know enough about it. Um, and lastly is law. Um, I never saw myself as a lawyer. I never really thought that that would be for me. I laugh because in high school, when I said I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, my dad always told me that because I'm so argumentative, apparently, that I should be a lawyer. And he always used to say that. And I used to swear, like, on my life that I would never enter politics, I'd never be a lawyer, blah, 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 blah. Typical, like, deviant behavior of a 14-year-old. But I insisted that I wouldn't do that. And here we are. You know, in all the grand scheme of things, I don't think it's that crazy because when I was little, I wanted to be a police officer. Well, I really wanted to be a detective, but you have to be a police officer first. But so I guess it's not that far off. But yes, I never saw myself going to law school. I'm not a history buff by any stretch of the means. And I just never considered it, but it has a lot of pros. It's usually like a 3-year program, so it's in between the master's and the doctorate degree in terms of length, which is like better, I guess. No one really wants to be in school for 7 years, so you know, in terms of pay, it's by far the highest. Another enticing factor. Also, it provides an exceptional amount of resources, and as I mentioned, in order to enact this type of systematic change, it seems obvious that this requires macro level policy reform and lawmaking. And so, who better to do that than a lawyer, Um, so, to be quite frank, at the forefront of my mind at this point in time is that law degree. Um, Now, I will say my hesitance here is I'm not sure that I could fulfill my obligations as a lawyer within this type of specialty if I don't first have contact at a lower level. So, to elaborate, will I be a productive and successful lawyer in enacting policy change and reform if I'm not first a social worker or first a psychologist experiencing the the corruption firsthand? Do I need to fill one of those roles first to see precisely what's wrong with the system so that I can then pursue, a law degree in which I address those very challenges? And I don't know. I don't know. I definitely think the experience would be valuable. I don't think I would regret it. But I say to myself, is that necessary? Do I need that experience first? I'm not sure. Maybe I do, but in that case, that means maybe I'm not a lawyer until I'm 30 or 40 years old. Is that something I want to do? Also, not sure. Or maybe I enter as a social worker and I decide never go back to school. Will I feel unfulfilled? I'm not sure. So that's sort of where we're currently at. A lot of questions up in the air, and at this point in time, I'm just trying to talk to as many people as I can, people that know me well, ask them, where do you see me? Professionals in the space, whether they be professors or people like in the working world, who are actually in these positions. But I really think that hearing different perspectives can be confusing, but ultimately helpful. So that's where I'm at. Very much all over the place, very much don't have an answer, and again, all of this. And it's almost September. It's my senior year of college, so big questions are coming up. Do I want to go right to grad school? Do I want to take a year, 2 years off? Do I not want to go at all? I think I know that that's for me. I think I know that I need to pursue a graduate level degree. That decision I feel like I've made. When I pursue it or what type of degree I pursue, not sure. But I definitely don't think this is it for my schooling. It's definitely not. But yeah, so I see myself sort of at this crossroads, and this is again is where I try to sympathize with myself and recognize that I'm definitely not the only one, and there are, most college kids experience this at some point, and maybe mine seems a little bit more hard hitting, but my circumstances are a bit atypical. I'm graduating early. I was a transfer. Like all of these untraditional circumstances mean that maybe I'm in a different headspace than some other students my age. But yeah, I even just think talking through it sometimes helps me make new connections or decide on this. Like when I talk about this, I get excited and I get passionate, and when I talk about this, I not so much, or you know or like I said, solidifying my own beliefs. The more I talk about it, the more I feel confident that that 1v1 therapeutic setting just isn't for me. And asked me a year ago, and that's exactly what I would have said I wanted to do. So definitely learning and growing, and I aspire to learn about new careers too. I don't know if this is just for psychology majors, but I find that so many students are truly like unaware of the types of jobs that they can pursue with their degree. And I feel like I'm educated on it, and yet I'm still learning of new ones. So yeah, I don't know if that's unique to psychology, but there's so many opportunities and so many different um, subsets of the field that we have at our disposal, and it's really just about finding which one's right for you, and where you see yourself being successful, being happy, being um, feeling fulfilled. So that's where I'm at. I just wanna end on a positive note. First of all, this is very helpful for my own mental well-being. But besides that, I just want to reassure any fellow college students out there, or even working professionals that are feeling unfulfilled in their position. We're all figuring it out. This is something I'm reminding myself of too, so this is as much a reminder for myself as you, but we're all figuring it out. We don't all have the answers. Even the people that look like they have their life together are going through something, and it is our responsibility to support one another in that search. Um, I feel like I'm surrounded by a lot of friends who feel like they know exactly what they want to do, and sometimes I can get discouraged that I don't have the clear answer in my head like they seem to, but those are the instances where I remind myself that, this thought and time that I'm dedicating to making the right decision for myself is gonna pay off, and it's gonna make me a successful working professional. So, yeah, be gracious with yourself if you're going through the same thing. Recognize that it's part of life. Recognize that it's really the first big decision that we make in life, and there's no wrong answer. Any experience is good experience, and even if you pursue a job or pursue a graduate degree that isn't for you, and you leave that position or you drop out of that program or whatever the case may be, valuable experience, and it gives us the opportunity to learn something new about ourselves, and that's it's always a good thing. So I leave you with some positivity. I hope that listening to someone's like streamlined thoughts, which very much felt all over the place, but I hope that hearing someone else talk through it can incentivize you to maybe do the same. Again, whether it's like with yourself or on a piece of paper or with, a willing friend or family member, that's great, but it's valuable to really consider your options, and I pride those people that are willing to admit to sort of some doubt in their own career or some fears about their own professional development, because we all want it to look like we have it all figured out. We all want to have the answer. We all want to be able to call grandma and, when she asks, tell her what we're doing with our lives. But reality is that most of us don't know, and that's okay. And that's what this period's for, is for figuring it out. So I wish you guys the best of luck. Thank you for being gracious as I get the ball rolling with the school year and try to fall back into a routine. And if you guys are in school, happy first week of classes, or start of classes if it wasn't your first week. I'm wishing you all a wonderful academic year. I have a busy semester ahead with school and work and all the things in between. And I've definitely been feeling an additional anxiety of, how am I going to keep this up? How am I going to find time to record and edit and all the things? But I know that we make time for the things that we value, and I value you guys, and I value this platform and this creative opportunity. And so I know I'll make time. It may not be perfectly consistent, but I'll try my best because, like I said, these episodes help me too. So I know I need to carve out some time for myself as well. So I'm trying my best. I'm thinking of you guys. I'm so happy to be here again. It's been so long since I was able to record an episode, but I really hope you guys enjoyed. Any feedback or constructive criticism for me, greatly appreciated. If you want to tell me I'd be an awful lawyer, please do. I value that opinion. Or if you have any ideas of your own that you want to share, or if you want to talk about your own career, I probably don't know much about it if it's not psych, but I can try. But yeah, I just want to open up this conversation because too often I fear that we keep it all bottled up inside, and again, we just pretend like we have it all figured out when we really don't. So yes, but hope you all enjoyed. It's so much fun talking to you guys. I hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll talk to you guys next week. Bye guys.